So hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's Asylee Benefits orientation held by the Asylee Outreach Project at HIAS. I'm Amy, I'm the Asylee Outreach Specialist at HIAS, and I am joined by our Senior Director for Legal and Asylum, Smita Datso, who will be able to address any legal-oriented questions that you may have during the presentation. I will be doing today's presentation in English, but as I said, we have Spanish interpretation available today for you to listen to if you press on the interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. I'm going to go ahead and remind the Spanish speakers in our audience of this, and then we will get started. Hola y bienvenidos a esta presentación hecho por el Proyecto de Asistencia para Asilados de HIAS sobre los siguientes pasos que hay que tomar después de recibir el asilo. La presentación de hoy se llevará a cabo en inglés, pero sí hay español disponible, interpretación en español disponible. Entonces, si quiere escuchar a esta presentación en español, por favor, haga clic en la figura de un globo terráqueo al fondo de la pantalla, donde dice interpretación y seleccione Spanish para español. Estas direcciones también están en el chat. Y por si acaso está viendo esta presentación a través de nuestra página de Facebook, recomiendo que vaya al enlace de Zoom en nuestra publicación del evento en Facebook, ya que la interpretación solo está disponible a través de Zoom. All right, so one more thing before we get started. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please do so by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I know some of you might be joining us through our Facebook live stream, so you can also submit your question as a live comment there. We certainly encourage questions, and we'll be leaving more than enough time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So as an overview, today we will be providing you with information on next steps following an asylum grant, the benefits available to asylees, how to access these benefits, and then a few additional pieces of information that asylees should be aware of. And please feel free to take pictures or screenshots of any information presented today. So let's start with the documents that you were provided when you received your asylum grant. It will be important to have these for, among other things, of course, accessing benefits for asylees. So if you received asylum through a USCIS asylum office, you should have received an asylum approval letter and a small card called a Form I-94 with an asylum stamp that indicates your asylum was approved. Both of these are your proof of asylum documents. However, if you received asylum through an immigration court, this is going to look a little bit different. You should have received an order of the immigration judge, but you likely did not receive the small I-94 card. So in order to receive your I-94, you will need to contact USCIS at the number on your screen in order to schedule an InfoPass appointment with your local USCIS field office in order to obtain that card. Now, having this card is important to have as an additional proof of asylum document. And when you call USCIS, you will basically need to explain that you're a recently granted asylee and that you need to set up an appointment to get your I-94. Please be prepared to have your A number and order of the immigration judge right in front of you, as they will likely ask you for this information. And in case it's useful, we do have an I-94 guide that walks you through all of the steps of setting up this appointment, which we can share out in the chat. And please note that I will be including this link and other important links I mentioned today in my follow-up email following this event, so no worries if you miss it. And please remember that it is very important to take care of all of these documents. These documents help verify your asylum status, as well as the date that your asylum was granted, and you will need them in order to access benefits for asylees. They will also be important to have when you apply for permanent residency, also often called a green card in the future. So please make sure not to write on or laminate them. And of course, remember to keep them in a safe place at home. Now, in the event that you do ever happen to notice any sort of error on your I-94 card after receiving it, you would need to contact your local USCIS asylum office by email in order to get that fixed. And you can search for the contact information of your local asylum office on the USCIS website in order to find their specific email that you need to contact. So now that I've covered the documents you should already have, what are those immediate next steps you should take after receiving asylum? So as mentioned before, if you received asylum through the immigration court and do not already have one, an important step is, of course, to obtain your I-94 by calling USCIS to make an appointment. But another important document that all asylees will need to obtain, if they have not already done so, is an unrestricted social security card. Having this unrestricted social security card will be important for accessing certain public benefits. So you definitely want to make sure you update that. So if you currently have a social security card and have not updated it, it likely lists a restriction such as valid for work only with DHS authorization, like the example in the upper picture. This is a restricted social security card, so you will need to update to an unrestricted card that does not list a restriction, just like the one shown in the lower picture. So if you currently have one of these restricted social security cards, or maybe you don't have any social security card, you will need to make an appointment with your nearest social security office to get that updated. And in order to make that appointment, you will need to visit the Social Security Administration's website on the screen in order to search your zip code and find the phone number of the office nearest you. You would then call directly and explain that you need an appointment to update to an unrestricted card. And as always, an alternative option is to call the Social Security Administration's national 1-800 number, which is also on the screen, for help contacting your local office. Overall, I would highly suggest calling and making an appointment to visit your local Social Security office rather than just going to the office in person without an appointment. During the pandemic, Social Security offices have been closed to walk-in services. And when you go to this appointment, you should take a photo ID, such as an unexpired foreign passport or a driver's license or a work permit, depending on what you have, your asylum approval letter or order of the immigration judge, and your I-94. Now, sometimes asylees do run into the situation where when they go to the Social Security office for their appointment, the employee there may not be familiar with asylum status and the documents that asylees can show in order to either update or get a new card. So in case this happens to you, I actually often recommend that asylees take a copy of the information that appears directly on the Social Security Administration's website, explaining the document that asylees can show to get a Social Security card. And specifically, I'm speaking about the part that appears on the slide under their refugees and asylees section. So hopefully that is a useful tip for you in case you run into that sort of situation while going through your Social Security process. So next, you'll also want to apply for asylee benefits. As an asylee, you may be eligible for a variety of time-sensitive benefits and services funded by the U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, through your local resettlement agency. So what sort of benefits and services might this include, and for how long are you eligible for them? So the first of these benefits is free refugee health screenings, often referred to as checkups, which are only available up to 3 months after your asylum grant. And it is really important to take advantage of these free health screenings, not only for health purposes, but also because it can help you complete some of the vaccine and medical record requirements for that future permanent residency application. And another major benefit is refugee cash assistance, which is available only up to 8 months after your asylum grant. This cash assistance can, of course, be helpful for paying your bills, but I do want to be clear that there are income eligibility requirements to receive this cash assistance. So your eligibility for this, as well as the amount that you end up receiving, will depend upon your income and household size. Now, also available during this 8 months after your asylum grant is a short-term health insurance program known as Refugee Medical Assistance, which provides health insurance for asylees who are unable to get Medicaid. For those of you who may be eligible for Medicaid, I will be speaking more about that in a few minutes. And then finally, asylees may be eligible for a number of refugee support services for up to 5 years after their asylum grant. And these include free English classes, job training programs, and employment services, which can either help you find a job, or if you already have a job, find one that is a better fit for you. And then finally, you may also qualify for case management services. Now, case management can include really a whole host of things, but a few examples are things like helping you apply for food stamps or Medicaid, helping you find housing if that applies to you, enrolling your children in school, among a ton of other services. And for those of you who have professional degrees from another country that you're perhaps hoping to get evaluated, be aware that resettlement agencies do offer degree evaluation services to help you gain recognition for that completed level of study. Now, at the end of the 5 years following your asylum grant, asylees would no longer be eligible for any benefits and services through their local resettlement agency. So as you can tell from this timeline that I just outlined, all of these benefits and services are really only available to you for a certain amount of time following your asylum grant. So for example, as I mentioned, eligibility for cash assistance, that already ends 8 months after an asylum grant. So it is really important that as an asylee, you reach out to a resettlement office really as soon as possible after your asylum grant, or if you're an attorney or a caseworker, that you let your client know of the existence of these and help them connect with resettlement services as soon as possible so they can take full advantage of these services that are offered to them. Now, we know that some asylees might be concerned about accessing these benefits. Will it have an impact on my immigration status? And I want to be very clear that for asylees, there is no negative impact. Applying for and receiving benefits will not affect your asylum status, and it will also not affect your ability to apply for permanent residency and citizenship. So please do not worry about that. Do not let it stop you from accessing these benefits. All right, so how do you access these benefits for asylees? So if you're in Maryland, please reach out to us, the Asylee Outreach Project. We coordinate referrals to resettlement agencies in the state, and we can help ensure that you are able to access these benefits. If you are in another state outside of Maryland, please directly contact a resettlement office near you. as soon as possible to get started on enrolling in these benefit programs. And if you're not sure where the resettlement office nearest you is, you can always visit the Department of Health and Human Services webpage linked on the screen to see a list of the resettlement agencies in your state. And when you contact one of these service providers, definitely make sure to have your identification card as well as a proof of asylum document. This would either be your asylum approval letter, order of the immigration judge, or I-94. And really don't worry if you have not yet updated your social security card. You don't need to have an updated version in order to enroll in some of the programs for asylees through your local resettlement office. You would need it for some of the federal public benefits that I will talk about next. So outside of these benefits and services offered by resettlement agencies, asylees may also be eligible for federal public benefit programs. And these are programs that are not only open to asylees and refugees, but actually the wider population in the United States as well. So here are a few common examples. One that I mentioned before is Medicaid, which provides health insurance coverage to low-income individuals and their families. I'll be providing a bit more information on medical insurance on the next slide. So there are also some temporary cash assistance programs that your family may be eligible for, such as TANF, which provides cash assistance specifically to low-income families, as well as provides additional support like childcare assistance and employment services. And another very common example is SNAP, also known as food stamps, which provides coupons that can be redeemed for basic food items at your local grocery store or retailer. I want to be clear that receiving these federal benefits is not guaranteed, and instead it is actually dependent upon your income and household size. So it's not that everyone is guaranteed these when they apply. So how do you apply for these federal public benefits? Well, if you enroll in a resettlement agency, they will likely be able to help you apply for these as part of case management services that they may offer to you. If for whatever reason your resettlement agency is not able to help with this, you should also be able to apply directly through your local Department of Social Services. And specifically, if you're looking for help applying to food stamps, oftentimes larger local food banks will have programs where they can help you apply for the SNAP food stamp program. All right, so let's talk more about health insurance. As I mentioned, you and your family may qualify for a public medical assistance program known as Medicaid, which provides insurance coverage to low-income individuals and their families. For those of you who have children, there's actually another major medical benefits program known as CHIP. And if your family is not eligible for Medicaid, but is also not able to afford private insurance, your children may be eligible for CHIP, which provides low-cost health insurance to children and families that make too much income to qualify for Medicaid. Now, both of these medical insurance programs are administered by your specific state. So if you're currently looking to get health insurance right away, my best advice is to reach out to your state's health insurance marketplace. And I would actually suggest reaching out even if you think you might not be eligible for federal programs like Medicaid, because they can help get you enrolled in additional subsidized and private insurance options that you may be eligible for. Now, most of you likely live in a state where there is a state health insurance marketplace that you can contact. So in Maryland, for example, we have Maryland Health Connection. I know up in New York, you all have New York State of Health. A lot of states have these. If you want to find out whether your state has one of these, you can go to the healthcare.gov website on your screen. If your state does not have a state health insurance marketplace, no problem. You would instead be able to apply for insurance directly through the healthcare.gov website. Now, moving on from benefits. As another next step, you will also want to apply for asylum status for your spouse and any unmarried children who were under 21 at the time of your asylum application. Remember that you only have up until 2 years after your asylum grant to apply for them to join you in the United States as asylees. And actually, just like you, your spouse and children would also be eligible for resettlement benefits and services for asylees upon arrival in the United States. So make sure that your spouse and children are also connected with a resettlement agency after receiving their asylum status. Now, lastly, after 1 year being physically present in the United States, following your asylum grant, you may apply for legal permanent residency, also often referred to as a green card. And then 5 years after the residency start date that is listed on your green card, you can apply for US citizenship. And now an exception to this would be if you are married to a US citizen at the time that you were granted your green card, in which case you would be eligible to apply for citizenship after only 3 years. And with US citizenship comes things like the ability to vote, eligibility for certain government jobs, the ability to obtain a US passport, in some cases, the ability to sponsor additional family members, and there are many more benefits to that. So again, these are really the important dates that you need to know. You can apply for permanent residency 1 year after your asylum grant. Remember that you have that 2-year deadline to apply for asylum for your family members after your asylum grant. And then finally, beginning 5 years after your residency start date, you can apply to become a citizen. So now I'm going to move on to the last few pieces of information that we think is important for asylees to be aware of. So as an asylee, you have automatic work authorization that does not expire. Now, this is regardless of whether or not you have an employment authorization document, EAD, which is often called a work permit. So when you are filling out the I-9 form required by your employer, you would check the fourth option called Alien Authorized to Work, and you would write NA for not applicable as the expiration date because asylee's work authorization, again, does not expire. So again, as an asylee, you do not need a work permit to be authorized to work in the United States. That being said, many asylees actually do prefer to have one because it can make getting documents, such as a driver's license, a bit easier when you have that additional form of photo identification. But you are not required to have one to legally work in the United States as an asylee, so just be aware of that. If you do not have a work permit, you would instead need to show your employer 3 things: a photo ID, your social security card, and your I-94 card. Let's say you do have a work permit. In that case, you would only have to show your employer 2 items: the work permit and your social security card. And then eventually, when you receive permanent residency, you would only need to show your residency green card. That's it. All right, so we know that asylees have automatic work authorization regardless of whether they have a work permit. But what do you do if an employer who is not aware of this tells you you're not allowed to work? Now, even though all asylees are authorized to work in the United States, some employers may not understand that. And sadly, this is a situation that sometimes may happen to asylees. So first, I want you to know that if someone tells you they cannot hire you because you are not authorized to work, first of all, they are wrong. And know that there are several ways you can help convince them that you are in fact authorized. Now, one option is if you are working with a case manager at a resettlement agency, they should be able to help you talk to your potential employer. Another option is you can also show the Department of Justice's Right to Work flyer linked on screen to your employer. Or you can also call their free hotline directly for assistance. The number is also on the screen. So let's now talk about another document you may be planning to obtain, which is a driver's license or state ID. Now, the process to obtain a driver's license or state ID card is a bit different in each state. So to find out about the process in your state, you should visit the website of your state's motor vehicles department or agency to view the list of required documents and to make an appointment. Generally, required documents include, but are not necessarily limited to, Social Security number, proofs of residency, a proof of identity like a photo ID, and often your I-94. And even if you do not want or need a driver's license, your state's motor vehicles office does offer additional identification cards other than a driver's license for those who would like an additional form of photo ID. So here's a few additional important things to know. First, you should be familiar with the United States Selective Service requirement. In the United States, all men aged 18 to 25 are required by law to register for the military Selective Service. Though to be clear, they will most likely never have to serve. So to complete this registration, you will need to go to the Selective Service website to register online or to your local US Post Office to register in person. If you fall within this category, please make sure to keep a copy of the proof of registration. You may need it to qualify for things like student loans and financial aid. And it's also very important to have for when you apply for citizenship in the future. Another important thing to remember is to pay your taxes. Paying taxes is required by law, but it actually also benefits you as well. By paying for taxes, you may qualify for things like stimulus checks. We've seen a couple of those during the pandemic, tax credits, as well as tax refunds. And your tax documents would also be helpful to have as a proof of your income eligibility for some different fee waivers that you may be eligible for. And if you need help filing your taxes, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, which is the US agency responsible for collecting taxes, offers free tax filing help for low-income taxpayers who qualify. And you can learn more at the irs.treasury.gov/free-tax-prep link. So now let's talk about travel. If you travel outside of the United States, do not use your home country's passport. This is very important. And instead, the best option for travel is to apply ahead of time for a refugee travel document, which is valid for 1 year. You will need to check with the country's consulate whether the destination actually accepts this document for entry. And also definitely make sure to plan ahead on this because according to the USCIS website, it does have quite a long processing time. For example, I saw one of the processing times was around a year. But please know that visiting your home country can risk your asylum status. as well as hurt your chances of getting a green card or becoming a citizen. So we would really advise you not to travel to your home country for that reason. And this is because if you return to your home country, you may run the risk of the US government no longer thinking your case was genuine. So we really want to avoid that situation. And of course, finally, you do not need any sort of travel document for domestic travel within the United States. And one final thing to be aware of is if you move, you must notify USCIS within 10 days. This is a mandatory requirement, as well as notify the US Post Office within 30 days to update your mail delivery address. Now that's really important because USCIS will not necessarily forward mail, including even your green cards, even if you have changed your address with the US Post Office. So make sure that you've changed your address with USCIS as well as the US Post Office. And in addition, you should also notify your employer, your state's Office of Motor Vehicles, as well as the resettlement or social services agency that's helping you access services. So that's it for the presentation portion. If you'd like additional information on everything Asylee benefits and post-asylum grant next steps, I would definitely encourage everyone to check out our website. That is asyleeoutreach.org. We have a ton of information up there. There is a page specifically for asylees that walks you through next steps and Asylee benefits, as well as a page specifically for attorneys, which provides all of this post-asylum grant information and more. And also definitely make sure to like and follow our program on Facebook. We are at Asylee Outreach. We do post resources and information pretty regularly on there. So definitely make sure to do that. And with that, I think we're going to open up to questions. I think we're going to begin answering some questions that I can see have already come in, but please definitely keep them coming. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, my co-presenter is our legal director, so she will be able to answer the legal related questions. Smita, I don't know if you've been monitoring, do you see any questions that have come in yet?
Yes, there is one question that's probably best for you. I'm going to just translate it into English, and then you can answer in English and Spanish. Can you request cash assistance after 8 months, or can I request once I've received it? I think that means once I've received asylum. This question is in Spanish, so you may want to answer in English and Spanish.
Okay, yeah, I will answer in English, but the interpreter will interpret it in Spanish. So unfortunately, you can't, extend that 8-month deadline for cash assistance. Really, ideally, it would be to access it within the 8 months after your asylum grant. That being said, there are some temporary cash assistance programs that fall under that federal public benefits programs that I mentioned. So you could potentially be eligible for those. And in that case, there is no 8-month deadline. There's no specific deadline for eligibility. So if you apply for those, that could be an option, and that could be something that a resettlement agency could help you with anyway as part of their case management services.
Next question, can you say more about credentials evaluation of education degrees received back home?
Yeah, so I know that one of the services that resettlement agencies can offer is degree evaluation services, right? So this is figuring out what exactly the degree is that you received at home, would be considered here, and to make sure that you gain recognition for that completed level of study. So that's degree evaluation services. As far as the actual recredentialing, I'm not sure if that falls under that, but I think they can refer you to specific recredentialing services.
Okay, one more question. Will I be able to petition for any other relatives to join me once I become a citizen? Yes, you can. Once you are a US citizen, you can file petitions not only for your spouse and your children under 21, but you can also apply for married adult children. You can file petitions for siblings and for your parents. Let's see. One more question. How long does it take from the time I apply for family reunification to have my children actually join me as asylees in the United States? This is a tough one because unfortunately, the answer is it depends. I would say the average is around 2 years. It's a two-part process. The first part is with US Citizenship and Immigration Services, and it's the actual petition. And then once that gets approved, then the processing goes through the Department of State, and your family members will have to have interviews at the consulate in their home country and be granted visas, asylee visas, to come to the United States. So generally, it is around 2 years, although we have seen some cases that are a bit faster and some cases that have taken longer. That said, if family members are at risk of danger or persecution, we would definitely recommend, if you file the relative petition, that you try to get it expedited and you explain why your family needs to come more urgently. And unfortunately, you missing them or they're missing you, is usually not sufficient to get expedited.
I just saw another question come in, and I think this one is geared towards you, Smita, probably. So this person asks, in the case that not everyone receives their EADs, their employment authorization document, do they have to apply for them? She said that the current EAD that they have is soon to expire. And they said that if she doesn't, renew it, that it will go away or something like that. But the point is, I think this is a question about EAD renewals.
So if you are an asylum seeker and your work permit expires, then that's true. Your actual work authorization expires unless you have submitted an application for renewal. Then you have 180 days past the expiration date. If you are an asylee, that means you've been granted asylum. You do not actually need an EAD. You do not need work authorization. All that you need to show that you are authorized to work with an employer are the 3 documents that were shown in the presentation. So you need your form I-94, the little white card, a driver's license, and your updated social security card. So again, if you're an asylee and the EAD that you have is expiring, there is no requirement to renew it.
Right.
There's a question.
I just want to go over the very first question one more time, because I think I understood what this person was saying now. They were asking, I believe, if they can apply, if they have to apply for the cash assistance after the 8-month mark, or if it's right after they receive asylum. So I just want to clarify that you should be, applying for the cash assistance and reaching out to your settlement office right after you receive asylum, not waiting those 8 months or any sort of time.
There's a question in the chat. I have to do work-related travel to different countries. Do I have to list all countries that I am planning to travel on the application form? If you are an asylee and you are applying for a refugee travel document, then yes, you do need to list all of the countries that you are planning to travel to. And again, I would just remind you that you should not be traveling with the passport of your native country. And you should not travel back to your home country because you will likely suffer consequences at the time that you need to apply for your green card or your citizenship. I think the application form does ask you how long you want to travel and where you're planning on traveling to. You should answer that fully and correctly. One more question. When can you apply for Medicaid?
You can apply for Medicaid anytime after receiving your asylum grant. Medicaid is not one of those programs that has a deadline like the 8-month deadline or anything like that. There is no deadline. You can have Medicaid for several years. As I said, Medicaid is not a benefit just specifically for asylees. It's something that's available to the wider population in the United States. So there's no specific deadline and anyone can apply at any time. All right, do you see any more questions over there?
There's one last question.
Okay.
I have family members who are asylum seekers. Are they eligible for any benefits?
Okay, yes, that's a good question. So unfortunately, they would not be eligible for asylee benefits yet, right? They'd be eligible for it after receiving an asylum grant. They would also unfortunately not be eligible for those federal public benefits that I mentioned. That being said, there are some state and local level benefits that may be worth looking into, and that's really going to depend on the local area and the state that you live in. So for example, here in the DC, Maryland area, DC and some surrounding counties have medical insurance programs that provide coverage for low-income individuals. And these are open to people regardless of immigration status. So that could be a benefit that asylum seekers are able to take advantage of. But again, this is really going to depend on your state and local area.
I see one more question. How long does it take to get a green card once you apply after 1 year of 1 year from the asylum grant? I am in Texas. So unfortunately, I don't practice in that jurisdiction. So some of those questions might be a little bit harder to answer because they can be very dependent on how quickly the local field office schedules interviews. But my fair guess would say you should expect at least 1 year of a wait between the time that you apply and the time that you get granted. And that is to say, not all jurisdictions require interviews for asylees anymore. It's unfortunately, it's kind of a lucky situation or not lucky. Some people get interviews and some don't. But yes, you should expect at least 1 year after you file. Okay, see one more question. My family are still in my home country. This is about a derivative asylee relative petition. My family are still in my home country and I have their details in my asylum application. Can I start their coming here now? So you cannot apply for your family members to join you until you have been granted asylum. But essentially, you can apply the day you get your asylum grants. You just can't do it until you actually get the date that you're granted asylum, because you will need to include your grant of asylum, whether it's the decision from an immigration judge or the letter granting you asylum from the asylum office. You will need to submit that with your relative petition.
I see that someone asked what kind of housing assistance are asylees entitled to. So unfortunately, there's no specific housing assistance or benefits that asylees are entitled to. That being said, if you enroll with a resettlement agency, they may be able to provide housing support. Like if you're in the process of moving and trying to find new housing, if you qualify for rental assistance, they could help you apply for rental assistance, which might be run through your local county or state, but there's no specific housing assistance. But you know, the cash assistance, I suppose you could use that towards rent as well. So sort of housing assistance in that sense.
How can I get entry-level training courses which help me get ready to get a job?
Entry-level training courses. Yes. So up until 5 years after your asylum grant, you may be eligible for something called Refugee Support Services, and under that would fall employment support services and job training programs. So that's going to depend on which programs your local resettlement agency has, but that could be something you could look into. Another thing that comes to mind is if you're interested in IT by any chance, there are quite a few like free IT training programs. You'd have to search Google a bit, but there are some of those. And then the last thing that comes to mind is across the United States, there are these things called American Job Centers. You could look up where your nearest American Job Center is. They also have employment support services, and they also do have some job training programs.
I'm already 1 year past my asylum grant. Is there any specific benefit that I still qualify for?
Yes, there would be. Unfortunately, you would not qualify for the cash assistance and refugee medical assistance anymore, but you would still be eligible for those refugee support services, very likely, which are available to you up to 5 years after your asylum grant. So you are very much still in that timeline. And that would include things like free English classes, employment support services and job training, and case management.
I live in Maryland. What are the next steps to apply for the Asylee benefits through your organization?
Please reach out to us. that is the next step. And we can connect you with a resettlement office where you can access Asylee benefits through. Let me turn to the next slide so you can see our contact information. All right, there you go. So the next step is to please reach out to us and we can definitely help you access those.
Are there any school grants or anything like that a granted asylee would be eligible for?
Unfortunately, not that I'm aware of. In terms of student financial aid, I think you might want to look into FAFSA, the federal student aid application.
FAFSA, you do need to have a green card for.
Okay. So not FAFSA yet, but perhaps in the future. But to my knowledge, there's not specific school grants, unfortunately.
What is case management?
So case management can kind of include a lot of different services. So there's no specific definition, but it could include anything from like helping you apply to federal public benefits programs. That's probably one of the more common forms of case management. So helping you apply for things like Medicaid and food stamps. Another big one is I've seen when people are in need of housing support, like they're moving and need to find housing that fits their budget. That's another thing. If you're someone who perhaps has requested that your children join you as asylees in the United States, and they're coming to the United States as derivative asylees, case management could include helping them get enrolled in their local school. So the point is, case management kind of includes a lot of different forms of support, but it's basically helping you navigate different processes.
That's all for the questions I see here. I think we have time for one or two more, if anyone has additional questions.
All right, well, I don't see any more questions. If that's all, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I really hope the information was helpful. Our contact information is on the screen. As I said, if you think of any additional questions later, I'm happy to help answer them. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone with the link to the recording of this, as well as additional materials and links from the Asylee Outreach Project and the link to join our mailing list in case that's of interest to anyone. We do hold these orientations once every other month. Our next one is in May, so please be on the lookout for event announcements and make sure to share with anyone who you think would benefit from them. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.